possible architectures and technology solution for facilitating scientific model sharing. This is, an outline of the presentation, which I will introduce briefly the concepts of knowledge generation and the context of what we are dealing with. Then architecture, conceptual approach and components, and finally some possible technology implementation of the architecture. So, of course, Paolo and Stefano already introduced these concepts. We live in a world where we need to address global environmental and social challenges, including food, water, energy, security, and so on. And to do this, international organizations have identified and defined a list of policy actions which will help addressing such challenges. These policy actions require the support for policymakers by knowledge platforms, so a set frameworks which require the development and use of knowledge for helping policymakers and decision makers to take evidence-based actions. In particular, such platforms should enable the generation of indicators and indexes to evaluate the different policy actions via a set of policy targets. The big Earth data science is a field of study which aims to provide the methodologies and instruments on how to generate knowledge from the numerous, complex, and diverse data sources that we have at the moment and which provide many different observations of our planet, of course, using remote sensing, in situ measurements, and so on. So we have this big Earth data, which really offers a great opportunity for extracting this knowledge from the large amount of data which is produced every day. And of course, a key tool for transforming this amount of data into knowledge is represented by the scientific models. So these are used in order to generate and those indicators and indexes that can help an evidence-based decision-making process. So, as it was anticipated in previous presentations, to generate a new knowledge, to generate new products, we need not only the scientific models, but we need a set of different kinds of resources. We need the data, we need the analytical resources, the scientific models, implementations of the scientific models, and we need infrastructural resources, so computational resources where we can run those models to process those data. So, of course, each of these type of resources is characterized by some properties and the associated challenges. Of course, for data, heterogeneity, especially in the geospatial world, is very high. As I said, and it was already pointed out, the volume of available Earth observation is higher and higher. And there exist a lot of different standards, including data models, metadata models, format encodings, and so on, and APIs and service interfaces for describing and accessing the available data. As far as the infrastructural resources, Here we are talking about all those resources which include networking, storaging, computing, and other infrastructure resources which are used for the execution of a scientific model. So we need scalability, because scientific models, of course, encompass a wide scale of complexity, and so we need scalability for executing them. We need infrastructure as a service in order to allow the provision of scalable infrastructure resources. And we also live in a world where we have many cloud providers which provide different IaaS services, IaaS APIs. So we need to be able to utilize the different cloud infrastructures that are present at the moment, and to be able to choose the different clouds according to the specific needs of the models, and sometimes even of the specific executions. And finally, analytical resources. These, of course, represent the implementation of the scientific models. Again, here we have a high level of heterogeneity, in particular about the different programming languages and environments which are used to implement these models. The execution environment can be very different for the different models, which very often utilize different software libraries and simulation frameworks. And of course, the different sharing approaches. Paolo and Stefano have already introduced the concepts of model as a tool, model as a service, and model as a resource. In this presentation, we are focusing on the approach based on model as a resource for the development, the design and the development of technological solutions enabling this pattern. So the idea, of course, is that we build on existing systems which are out there and which share on the web these types of resources. So we can have more systems sharing only one type of resource, for example, only infrastructure resource, such as a cloud provider, or systems which provide only data resources. There are many data sharing initiatives at different levels, regional, global, and so on. Or we can have systems that provide more than one type of resource, analytical and data, and so on. So we must be able to utilize and orchestrate these resources provided by different existing systems. To do this, we have designed and prototyped a so-called virtual earth cloud layer, which is a multi-cloud integration brokering framework for big earth data analytics. This layer is in charge of implementing all the necessary steps and functionalities in order to exploit the resources shared by the different systems and allow their exploitation by different client applications, enabling a unique entry point and a homogeneous interface for this. So the architecture, I will cover briefly both the conceptual approach that we have followed and the components that are part of this virtual earth cloud framework. So first of all, the high-level requirements. The main goal is to allow the execution of analytical software on the most appropriate of the available systems in a seamless way for the requester, which is the final user via a client application. So we have to implement the workflow required for the model execution, which means configuring the environment. Of course, the model shared as a resource, so we have to configure the environment, programming language, software libraries, and so on. We have to ingest the input data, trigger the model, and save the output. We must be able to provision the required computational resources from the available underlying enterprise systems. We must be able to discover and access the required data and model resource from the underlying systems. And we must optimize the execution of the model, for example, based on availability of computational resource, availability of required data, latency time, and so on. So for addressing those high-level requirements, we have our conceptual approach is based on 3 pillars: containerization, orchestration, and brokering. The containerization allows to support different programming languages and execution libraries on different computational environment. The orchestration is the automated configuration, management, and coordination of computer systems, application, and services to allow a specific goal, and the brokering, which is an approach for implementing interoperability to connect different existing systems. So in particular, containerization allows the packaging of the software code as well as its necessary components. These include libraries, frameworks, and other dependencies, and create a so-called container, which is a single, fully packaged, portable executable, which can run on any infrastructure which is compatible with the specific containerization technology. And this is usually called the container engine layer, on top of which these packages, these containers can run. The orchestration is necessary in this framework, and it is necessary at different levels. What does it mean? It means that we must orchestrate at the model execution level. This includes ingesting the input data, configuration of the model execution, triggering the model, and storing the generated output. Then we have orchestration, which is needed at the container level. So selecting the computing node where to run the container, execution of all container level configuration, for example, links to persistent storage on the machine, triggering the container, monitoring it, and so on. And then we have orchestration at the infrastructure level. When new computational resources are requested on one of the available systems that share these kinds of resources, it is necessary to coordinate and invoke the instantiation of the different resources, including processing, storage, networks, and so on. And finally, brokering. Brokering is an approach where the interoperability between the different systems is implemented by dedicated components, which are called brokers, and which implement all the required mediation and harmonization functionalities in order to allow the different participating systems to interact with each other while maintaining their own existing interfaces, protocols, and data models. So based on this approach, we have defined a set of components which implement the virtual Earth cloud. For simplicity, here I have only one system that shares the different kinds of resources, but this is useful to show how the different components interact with the different types of resource. First of all, we have a model execution orchestrator, which is the main entry point for client applications. It publishes APIs which can be invoked by client applications in order to request the execution of the model along with the required input data. And this component implements all the business logic which is needed in order to execute a model, as I said, ingesting input and so on. Then we have the data and analytical software broker. This is a component which enables the discoverability and access of data and analytical resources, provides a unique entry point through a set of APIs in order to discover and access these kinds of resources. Then we have the infrastructure and component, infrastructure orchestrator and broker. This is a component that is in charge of connecting to the systems that share infrastructural resources, and it is able to discover such resources and, if needed, allocate new infrastructure resources. Finally, we have a task optimizer, which is responsible for selecting the cloud, let's say, the computational system where to execute a specific model with those inputs. This is a specific component because, of course, it can be implemented with many different strategies. The most common one would be, as Stefan was saying, move the code to the data, but one could think of other strategies, for example, execute the model on the basis of cost optimization or other kinds of strategies. So this is a component which stands alone. Based on these architectural components, we have defined a possible technology stack for implementing this framework. In particular, we have selected a set of existing technologies that address the specific functionalities that we have defined so far. The Geo Discovery and Access Broker is a brokering framework for data discovery and access. It is one of the components of the Global Earth Observation System of Systems platform. And so it implements the necessary mediation, harmonization, and distribution functionalities to connect the hundreds of data sources that contribute their data to GEOS. So this implements the data brokering functionality. The Virtual Earth Laboratory is a framework that implements model execution orchestration functionalities. So it is able to automate all the technical tasks to execute a model on different cloud infrastructures. As far as container orchestration, Kubernetes is a well-known open source container as a service framework and allows the automation of applications, container-based application deployment, scaling, and so on. As far as containerization, we have used Docker and the Docker engine, which is one of the most widely known and utilized containerization technologies. And as far as infrastructure as a service brokering and infrastructure orchestration, we use the combination of two existing implementation, which are Cluster Autoscaler, that is a software that can automatically adjust the size of Kubernetes cluster to place new containers, and the Cluster API, which is a project that allows the creation, configuration, and management of clusters and provides interoperability with the different cloud providers' APIs, IaaS APIs. So how do we use these technologies to implement the different components that we have defined? We did this experimentation in collaboration with the European Commission Joint Research Center, where we have the model execution orchestrator, which is implemented by VLab and based on the Docker containerization technology, the infrastructure orchestration and broker, which is based on the Kubernetes cluster API and cluster autoscaler technologies. The data and analytical software broker is implemented via the GeoDAB as far as data discovery and access, and the Virtual Earth Laboratory as far as scientific models as a resource discovery and access. And for the task optimizer, we have implemented an ad hoc solution, simple solution for the prototyping and the proof of concept that we implemented. So the future work that we will focus on for enhancing these prototypes include the support of real-time capabilities, the integration with a knowledge base, because of course what we have seen so far deals with the possibility to execute a model ingesting some inputs data, but the soundness of the utilized input data from the scientific point of view into a specific model is left to the user at the moment, and of course this is not possible for real world end users. So we need to integrate this with a knowledge base which provides these formalized links between available data and available models. Of course, data quality and uncertainty will have to be considered in this framework as well. And finally, extending the framework in order to deal with the specific functionalities that are needed for implementing AI and digital twins of the Earth. As far as AI, from the technical point of view, it is already possible to execute both the training and the prediction phase, but of course the framework has to be enhanced to manage those phases in a consistent way, and the digital twins of the Earth as well. Thank you.